Hey guys, it's Ross over at the Daily Jaws, and welcome to another exclusive interview. Now, today I'm speaking with Greg Dole. Now, the name may not be familiar, but the line that Greg has in Jaws certainly will be. Greg, welcome to the Daily Jaws. How are you?
Thank you, Ross. By the way, I really appreciate and applaud you for what you're doing and advancing Steven Spielberg's iconic movie. The spirit continues, and hopefully, again, it'll last for another 50 years with your work. And
Oh, I will drink to your legs on that, Greg, honestly. And thank you so much for the recognition. It's a really lucky position for us to be able to be in, to be able to connect with people who have been directly involved in the movie. And it's just something that just continues to drive itself. You know, the people absolutely are in love with this movie. Now, Greg, we have to ask, obviously, how are you connected to the movie Jaws?
well, let me take it back a year before. Well, it wasn't a year. Three months before the movie was started to film. I had just finished 2 tours in Vietnam in the Navy on the iconic aircraft carrier USS Midway. I left San Francisco after that tour, came back to where I grew up on Cape Cod, and went to work as a parking cars down in Woods Hole, which is the jumping off point to get to via steamship to Martha's Vineyard in Nantucket. And so while I'm there parking the cars, this big blue van pulls up to get ready to go onto the ship, and it says Universal Studios. And I looked at it, and I went over to the driver because I'd done some things in high school, thespian stuff, and in college. And so I said, well, "What's going on over there?" And he said, "They're making some movie about a fish." And so I said, "Okay, yeah, there's a book out, and it's about this fish." So I immediately that night went and bought the book, Peter Benchley's book, and and uh, and I have it autographed, by the way, by Spielberg.
Wow.
I'll read you a couple of quotes later. And read it, and then a day later got on the steamship, took the day off from work, went over and read for 3 different parts. And the third one was the one I ultimately was captured the attention of Sherry Rhodes, who was the casting director, as well as Spielberg, who was walking by, and I'm doing this piece that is on the silver screen now. He said, "Take him to wardrobe." So he liked that. He liked what I said because I just gotten out of the Navy. So I knew all the jargon, and so anyway, I went over and read for the part and was called back to be a part of the movie. And so I was there for 3 weeks. The weather, as you know, and I think even Jeffrey Kramer mentioned the other day at his, well, the one I watched the other day of him, the weather didn't hold. I was there 3 weeks doing this part. And I was watching Roy Scheider doing push-ups in the sun in the beach or on the clouds. And Robert Shaw was hanging out in his trailer most of the time.
Mm.
And obviously, Steven Spielberg was extremely busy all the time, trying to pull this movie off, which was, as you know and others know, it was late by so many days because of early. And so anyway, I got the part and was out on the boat and filming that part, and I saw these 2 fins, and they were fake fins because the little boys had them on their backs, and they were, "Oh, Jesus Christ, Fin Shark 350."
Jesus Christ, Spin Shark 350!
And we all went over and people started rushing out of the water, trampling one another to get out. It was a great scene to be a part of.
Mm.
And I was helping pull the kids out of the boat, out of the water into the boat. So anyway, it was a great opportunity that I've cherished, forever. It's part of me. All my friends all know me as the guy who was in the movie Jaws. Quite a bit of money. It paid for condo. It paid for law school, which is why I was working down at this whole parking cars. I was going to go to law school. So about it turned out to be just a great affair, a great experience, and obviously I'll never forget it. And through your work, I hope others never forget it.
Yeah, it's one of those moments, even though you're playing a supporting character with one line and one big moment, it's something that everybody remembers. Nobody forgets that line. Now, there is one question we do have about the line, because obviously the full line is Jesus Christ, Fin Shark 350. Just for those at home who aren't necessarily aware of what that 350 means, what does that mean?
That's the direction. If you look at, like in the Navy, if you're looking off the bow of your boat, ship, it's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. 350 is almost at 360, which is the entire circle of, So that was what I was trying to convey, was the shark was over here.
So it doesn't mean 350 sharks then. It's just the direction. Which it could possibly mean, but thank you for clarifying. In terms of that line, because it's got that naval sort of connotation in there in terms of the coordinates and things like that, is that something that you brought to the line, or was that already written for you?
No, that was all my work. That's what I said in the interview, and I kept it. They liked it, and said, so that was all mine. Nothing odd, but I think it added something.
And do people, or maybe when the movie sort of it came out around the time, did they recognize you? Did they shout the line at you? What was that like?
I remember going when it first opened in Falmouth, which is near Woods Hole, the jumping off point. I grew up there. And my mother to the movie, and there were people standing up in the movie when I said my line, and I know that guy. And I had people on planes flying, watching the movies. I know that guy. Greg, I just on the movie, so it caught. Anyway, it was a great line.
No, it was a great line.
Other things that I said, but they cut them. In addition, left full runner, come to court, oh, ahead full. Yeah, I continue with the jargon, the Navy jargon, but they just kept it.
Just that one line. Well, it's, as we said, it's an iconic line. From a supporting character, it's brilliant. I don't think even Robert De Niro could have delivered it any better than you. In terms of, say, that you said you were working on this scene sort of for 3 weeks, what was that kind of like? Because obviously it's a split-second moment in the movie, yet you were on the movie for 3 weeks. So was there a lot more for you to do that got cut out, or was it purely just sort of being available to be able to shoot when you needed to be?
Yes, that. And by the way, I wanted to mention that I remember when the beginning of that first 3 weeks, I was there in the hotel where everyone was staying. And we're all having breakfast, and it's a lot of the principal actors. Richard Dreyfuss walks in. He'd just gotten off the set of American Graffiti. He's pulling in. He says, "I'm here. I'm here." So I couldn't forget. That was like, okay, I guess we're starting.
Did anybody care?
Not really. I think I was one of the people who had seen him in that movie. I may be wrong, but
this is the thing, because Jaws, I mean, his star was kind of on the rise, and obviously I think Jaws obviously turned anybody who was sort of associated with the movie into sort of megastars because it became such a phenomenon. What about Robert Shaw and Roy Scheider? Did you get much of a chance to sort of speak with them or get to know them at all, or work with them?
Roy a number of times, but as I said, Robert Shaw was hiding in his trailer, having a couple of adult beverages, I suspect. At least that's what. And so it was again. Scheider was doing push-ups out there all the time. And I think again, Jeffrey referenced that the other day when I watched his clip.
Yes. Roy Scheider, he loved the sun. He spent a lot of time in the sun. I think we highlighted on one of the interviews in Jaws, for the Jaws 2 series that we did of interviews, that Roy Scheider had to be color corrected because his skin color kept changing throughout the shoot. So yeah, it's not surprising to see Roy, or to hear Roy out on the beach doing his push-ups. What about Steven Spielberg? Because as you said, obviously he is someone that who just sort of so happened to walk by at the right moment, liked what you did, and sent you down to wardrobe. But beyond that, did you get to work with him directly at all? And what was that like, if so?
I don't recall, uh, except for that scene.
Mm,
And he was out in the boat next to us filming.
hmm.
Uh, that's the really, I never had any conversations with him.
Okay. Well, the reason I come back to Spielberg, Greg, is there's something that you may or may not be aware of, but you have been taking credit for some of Steven Spielberg's work without realizing. Would you
I've
like me
been
to
thinking,
explain?
yeah, yeah, please.
So, have you ever heard of the website called IMDb or the Internet Movie Database?
On that, I'm on that
You have,
database.
you're aware of it. Let me show you something. I'm going to share something on the screen. So, hopefully, you can see it and the viewers can see it. And what it is, it's an image from IMDb. It's a screenshot. Now, this is going to be, it might be a little bit small for you to see, but this is a
Yeah,
screenshot from the Internet Movie Database. And because we did a little bit of research and looking up on you before we see the interview, and you are credited on IMDb as the sonar operator in Jaws.
correct.
And beneath that, it's got the quotes from the sonar operator. And it's the person who radios the orca when the shark first encounters the crew. That voice is actually Steven Spielberg, but apparently, according to the Internet Movie Database, it's you.
Amity Point Light Station to Orca. This is Amity Point Light Station to Orca. Come in, Orca.
Orca, come in.
I have Mrs. Mark Brody here.
I'm not sure how it was.
It's just the love of the internet, basically, viewers. The internet has got this wrong, so we're going to have to get in touch with the IMDb people and just correct that. Don't worry, I'm sure Steven Spielberg is not angry at you. He probably doesn't care. But we just saw that and we thought, what an amusing thing. And if Steven Spielberg is watching, I'm sure Greg is very sorry for that mishap, even though he's got absolutely nothing to do with it.
They only had 10 credits in that movie. And today they have 20 minutes of credits at the end of most movies. I was disappointed with that. In fact, the company I worked for was a big sponsor at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C.
Mm.
And sponsored an event there. And Steven Spielberg came. He was the honoree among John Williams, who wrote the music that I'm fully aware of. And I asked him at one point, and I said, is there any chance, have you given any thought to expanding the number of credits at the end of the movie? And he said, well, we have, but it'd be too expensive. So I don't know how expensive it would have been, but I know a lot of people who are in the movie.
It's an interesting point because I think, yeah, obviously nowadays, particularly in the sort of, because obviously we're speaking just as the SAG strike has now ended. Obviously, credits and things like that are really, really super important. And I know that Jaws is lauded for its economical editing, should we say? So that potentially is another reason for it. But it's something we've never really thought about. So yeah, maybe we need to do a special extended edition of the credits, and that probably would run on for about 20 minutes because the amount of people that were involved in making this movie is phenomenal. The more we learn about it, the more people we find are just involved.
Do you have access to that information that you can create it?
We could try. We could certainly try doing a version of it. We would have to double check a lot of sources, but it's absolutely possible. We are a fan base. We are a mere fan base. We're not anything official. However, we could petition Universal Studios. Although they'd probably boot us off the internet if we did that, but it's worth a shout. What did you think of the final movie when you saw it for the first time?
Like everyone else. In fact, after watching that opening scene with Chrissy, I would not go over my waist in seawater for the next 3 summers.
Wow.
Really, it was one of the most powerful movies in that regard that I'd ever seen and to have ever seen.
And that's coming from a Navy man. That's powerful.
Yeah.
And before appearing in Jaws, as you said, you were in the Navy, and one of the key characters, Quint, is a Navy man himself, and obviously he went through that horrific tragedy on the USS Indianapolis. Had you heard about the USS Indianapolis story through your Navy days? And what did you think of Quint's retelling of the story in the movie?
I was going to say, I think that was by far the best moment in that movie, the most compelling. It
Mm.
captured everyone's attention. And he did it, I think, in one take. It looked like it, as I recall. 2 takes.
The story behind that, as far as we're aware, is that it was 2 takes and it was shot over 2 days. The first take, Robert Shaw wasn't at his best, should we say? He was quite drunk at the time.
Yes.
And he did the speech, and he knew he hadn't really done a great job on it. So he phoned Steven Spielberg back apparently that night or possibly the next morning and just said, let me have another crack at it. Came on set, was absolutely sober, aced it apparently in 1 take. And then what they did is they edited the 2 together. So when you look at it, you can ever so slightly in certain shots detect day 1 and day 2. But for all intents and purposes, he got it in 2, maybe 3 takes.
Yeah. He nailed it. That whole scene with him and Dreyfus showing wounds and their tattoos and whatever else.
And
Yeah.
what do you think of the sequels? So Jaws 2, Jaws 3D, and Jaws the Revenge. Have you seen those?
I just saw Jaws 2.
Okay.
And it just didn't get, I couldn't get there from here. You know, it just didn't do it for me. You know,
Yeah.
after this iconic movie, you know.
Yeah.
And Steven didn't do the second one or third one, did he? Direct it?
No, he did the first one, and that was it. He had the opportunity apparently to do it, and he wanted to look at Quint's story on the Indianapolis or some kind of prequel story involving Quint. But he also said at the time that he felt sequels were a bit of a, I think the phrase he used was a carny trick. Like he didn't feel that it was something that he should be doing or a little bit beneath him. But then he actually went on to make a few sequels to the Indiana Jones movies, so maybe he changed his mind. But
Oh, yeah.
yeah. I think as well, the challenge is it's a story of, well, it's not, but it's a story about a fish, and it's a fairly unrefreshable idea. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of once it's been done, it's been done. And, you know, I mean, obviously there's been 3 other movies after that, Jaws 2, Jaws 3D, and Jaws the Revenge. And you see more and more shark all the way through them. And Jaws the Revenge is often lauded as one of the greatest comedies ever made. Apparently, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but apparently, I mean, I've seen it. It's, yeah, you could class it as a comedy. Some of the stuff the shark gets up to is crazy. But all it does is reinforce the greatness of the original movie, I think, you know, and it's also quite symptomatic of the mainstream Hollywood thing as well, about trying to get as much out of something as they can, no matter how ridiculous things kind of get, if that makes sense. So life after Jaws, obviously you were a Navy man and an actor, and then you went on to become a lawyer.
Right.
Now, looking at Jaws on its own, forget Jaws 2 and all the other things, as a lawyer, do you think the residents of Amity Island had a case against the mayor for what happened? And if so, would you like to defend or prosecute?
Oh, I'd be on the prosecution side. Malfeasance, dereliction of duty. You know, I'm not practicing law anymore, but those come to mind quickly. Ray Hamilton did a great job with all of his presentations. And the one on the beach on 4th of July, when we sight the shark, he's on the, you know, they got a microphone to his voice and saying, yeah, we've caught the shark and I think we're all good now. And please go into the water, everyone. And then boom.
That scene when he's on the beach and no one's in the water, and he encourages that couple with children to go into the water so other people would go. For me, I'm like, that is beyond unscrupulous. That's ridiculous. And I think that, again, it's the thing for me is there's you've obviously got a copy of the book, and we will definitely come on to that because I want to hear more about that. But in the book, there's a really interesting backstory about the mayor and his links to the mafia and very shady real estate deals, and how he's under pressure just to keep the town moving from a financial point of view. When I rewatch Jaws and I see Mayor Vaughn sort of through that lens, it makes me understand him a little bit more, because none of that is touched on in the movie. And I think, again, when you look at Murray Hamilton, I'm not sure if you ever did read the book or not, but you can look at that performance. either way, purely just as Spielberg's movie vision for the character, or Benchley's version of the character as well. And I think one of the secrets to Jaws is the casting. You know, it's a very simple story, but the actors bring every single nuance of stress and pain. The stakes are very, very high, and ultimately it comes back to that whole moral story of light and dark, right and wrong, beaches open, beaches closed.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I think for me. What do you think is the sort of the overall impact of Jaws?
Well, as I said at the outset, it is, if not the iconic, an iconic movie. And the success that it had in the box office, first one to go over $100 million in receipts. I've read a number of articles. I got all these books. I got one by Edith Blake.
Yes,
They're on site capturing all.
Wonderful book,
and
absolutely wonderful,
among others. And they said, I read that Spielberg and one of his other major directors, or not directors, but producers, were standing at the back of the theater, I think in LA. And they're sort of not quivering, but they're wondering, how is this going to go? How is this? And anyway, Spielberg said, I don't know. And they wondered, they stayed after the movie, they stayed the whole movie. And, they just, their eyes popped out and they said, I think we've got something here.
Yeah.
Brilliance of film technique, the way he pulled that whole movie off.
It is, and I think Spielberg was 26 when he did it, and by that point in his mind, he was a veteran. He'd been doing TV, and he'd already done a previous movie before that. But he's 26 to pull something like of that magnitude off. In an interview, Spielberg said when he thinks of Jaws, he thinks of stupidity and bravery, and both of those things happening underwater. And I'm like, that's probably about right, because you've got to be very ignorant to the massive undertaking of trying to create something like Jaws, particularly in those practical ways, anchoring boats and having a mechanical shark and all of those other things, and then having the shark not work. So how do we circumnavigate that? And you end up getting a very character-driven piece, and the shark almost becomes incidental, but it plays a massive, massive part because it challenges each of these characters in very, very different ways.
Because the owners of the studio, whose name I've forgotten,
Sid Sheinberg was the owner of the studio at the time.
Well, not the two guys who were very
the producers. It was Richard Zanuck and David Brown.
And they were apparently just wringing their hands about how are we going to do this. And they gave him, figured out he can do this, and they gave him, carte blanche to finish this movie and get it out.
And honestly, I think that was one of the best things that's ever happened for cinema, because I was on a podcast recently called Movie DNA, and we were talking about things that, in terms of movies that we kind of dislike and hate. And one of my pet peeves about movies is studio interference. And there's a movie. Are you familiar with the Alien franchise? So Aliens with Sigourney Weaver. It's sort of a sci-fi kind of horror.
Oh, yeah.
And it made a few years after Jaws. And the third part was directed by David Fincher, who has gone on to make Seven and Fight Club and Zodiac and all of these incredible films. But he did Alien 3 to start with. And the amount of studio interference absolutely killed his vision for it, because he didn't have the protection from the producers and all that. And it almost cost us an incredible genius. Whereas Steven Spielberg had the pressure from the studio and a lot of other things. They went sort of 2-3 times over budget just off, just for one thing. And then let alone time and everything else. They had to keep pushing back the release date of Jaws. And it was supposed to coincide, or at least tail off on the back of or ride the wave of the hype of the book. Which had come out, because they were trying to do it within sort of a year or so, which was obviously not possible. But because David Brown and Zanuck protected him and said, like to your point, carte blanche, do make the movie you want to make. We didn't just get Jaws, but we got Spielberg as well. And Spielberg hasn't done bad. Spielberg's done all right.
Yeah. I applaud them all.
It's incredible, isn't it? Now, you've got quite a special possession that you flagged up at the beginning of the interview, which is your Jaws first edition. Take us through that.
Well, I bought, as I said, and before I went over to read for the parts, and I brought it with me, obviously. A little bit tattered now, unfortunately. And I had Spielberg sign it. I had Dreyfuss sign it. I had Benchley sign it, among others. I want to read a couple of these to you.
Please do.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Could you bring that just a little bit closer to the screen so we can see it? Oh, amazing. Wow. Look at that. Oh, incredible.
And so it says, Spielberg writes, "Keep it up, Greg. You're welcome to come to Hollywood, but beware of the sharks."
Good advice.
And Dreyfuss wrote, when I tell people, they just laugh. And he says, "Greg, I told it to Gable, Clark Gable, and I'm telling it to you. Get out of the business. Your ears are too big."
Wow.
A class. Oh, yeah.
Just in terms of your ears, your proportions seem correct. So I wouldn't worry about that. Oh, it's wonderful. What a fantastic souvenir from it sounds like an incredible experience, sort of making this movie. I can't not mention the incredible poster you have behind you, Jaws Fest. Did you attend Jaws Fest? And if you did, what was that like?
Union, I can't see it, whatever the date is up there, 20.
It's August 9th to August 12th, 2012.
There was a reunion of any of the cast members who wanted to come back and enjoy one another and talk about their experiences post filming. And so, yeah, I was there. It was great. They had set up in the town hall a table for the different actors to sit behind and take questions and talk. And so, you know, they went to the extent of having the town hall opened up and people are in the audience. This is such a part of the history of Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah, yeah. And Martha's Vineyards, they occasionally come up with some absolute doozies of behind the scenes photographs that we've never seen before. So we'll share that on our Facebook group or on our Twitter, because this is one of the most incredible things that I find about Jaws, you know, and it's through speaking to people like yourself, who incidentally, viewers, Greg reached out to us. It was a wonderful surprise to find his email in my inbox one morning. So thank you, Greg, for getting in touch. But also sources like Martha's Vineyard, or people that were just indirectly involved with the movie. Or there was Harry's scrapbook. Some of the photographs from that were absolutely phenomenal, and I think that was one of his relatives that just kind of dug it out, made it public, and then all of a sudden the Jaws community are like, wow, these are these incredible photos. So even though we're talking about a movie that was made 50 years ago, or nearly 50 years ago, we're still discovering new things, new stories, new people, new pictures. And I think that's part of the secret to the longevity. Jaws, even though it's a massive, massive phenomenon, the making of the movie was almost its best kept secret. And that's the story that keeps giving, I think, in my opinion. And that's, for me, what makes running something like the Daily Jaws just so fascinating and obviously exciting, because they get to speak to people like yourself.
Yeah, and last summer, went over to visit the inn again, where we had all stayed. And it was a lot of fun walking down memory lane. It was terrific. So,
well, Greg, we normally round off the interview with one final question, and it's putting you on the spot, but we're going to ask the question, see what you come up with, because it's a really interesting, inventive question, we hope, and we always look forward to the answers that we get. So obviously there hasn't been a Jaws movie for about 35 years since Jaws the Revenge. Oh. If, Greg, you were put in charge of the new Jaws movie that was going to be made, what would be your 60-second Jaws movie pitch?
I would say, gentlemen, ladies, this movie is iconic, that we made 50 years ago. People still follow it. It's on television somewhere in the world every day, if not multiple places. If we do a sequel to this, it's as good as, or nearly as good as, if that's even possible, as good as then you're going to get the theaters filled with people. They're going to love it, and the new generation will see what it is that everyone, their parents and others have been talking about for 50 years.
Absolutely love it. And the thing that I think you've hit there is the characters that we recognize today. I think during COVID, Jaws was used almost as a metaphor for lockdown in terms of beaches open, beaches closed, and certain politicians have been, and even in the UK, have been, should we say, compared to Mayor Vaughan. And also last year, when Jaws was re-released in IMAX and in 3D, the amount of people that were taking kids to see Jaws, I would guess probably for the first time. And the movie played brilliantly. They were laughing at the right points. The kids were screaming at the right points. Whether they were going into the ocean, I couldn't tell you. But a movie that's made 50 years ago, that's had so many apes and so many rip-offs of it made, and so many of the references even seen in sort of modern cinema now, when you go back to the original source, it's very, very difficult to beat it as a cinematic experience. And you played your part in that, Greg. You know, you had one of the most iconic lines in the movie. So what we'd love for you to do before we sign off is, could you deliver the line for us one last time?
I'm sort of looking out like this, and it's like, Jesus Christ, spin shark 350, all ahead, full left, full rudder. Well, I cut out those last few words, but anyway, it was a trip of a lifetime for me. Thank you again for keeping this phenomenon going.
Oh, well, thank you for reaching out and giving us the opportunity to share your story. It's you know, it's really important that we do in some way document the people that were involved and hear their views and their stories from them. So thank you again for reaching out.
My significant other is also trying to get me back into movies, and so hopefully something will pop. She's got a lot of irons in the fire on my behalf. So
I've got Spielberg's number. Hang on a minute. Steve? Yeah, Greg's back in the game. Yeah, give him a call. Sorted. All right. So hopefully Spielberg will come knocking again, because he's going to need someone to give him those compass coordinates again, isn't he? So that's your niche. That's the character you play. I'm sure there is someone out there waiting for you to knock on their door. Greg, it's traditional for me to leave the last word with the guest. Is there anything you'd like to say before we sign off?
Yes, again, thank you for keeping this spirit of Jaws and phenomenon alive and moving forward.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, guys, I've been Ross for the Daily Jaws. I've been speaking with Greg Dole, aka Jesus Christ Fin Shark 350. And until next time, I'll drink to your legs and I'll bid you farewell and adieu.
Cheers.